Have you both here? So, Dasha, you first. What does Harris's Veep vetting process look like, particularly given this extremely short window to get it done?
Yeah, not a whole lot of time here. Clock is ticking, Alex, and it's looking a lot like this event behind me here. We're in a high school gym right now in Montgomery County, Pennsylvania. Of course, a critical battleground state. The governor of the state, Josh Shapiro, will be here, and the governor of Michigan, Governor Gretchen Whitmer, here as well, both rumored to be on the contenders list, though Shapiro is inching his way onto the short list for a couple of reasons. Number one is the state that he governs, Pennsylvania, is just so important. Its importance can't really be overstated. He also, Alex, has largely been a bipartisan governor. That's really what he's built his brand on, someone that can bring together both Democrats and Republicans. I'll tell you, a whole lot of influential Democrats here in Pennsylvania have endorsed him for VP, really want him to get this position. But for voters, they see the VP as maybe something that could be helpful, but not necessarily. Take a listen.
I think it's too up in the air at the moment as to who's going to be selected as the vice president. But I am taking comfort in the fact that there are a lot of excellent choices out there.
Honestly, I feel like what was more important to me was the actual president than the vice president, because you don't see them a lot. They do a good amount behind the scenes, but yeah, honestly, I feel like president is definitely more important to me.
And Alex, Governor Whitmer, who's going to be here today, has said she doesn't necessarily want the role. Still a lot of people excited about her as well. I talked to some folks in the crowd here that's gathering behind me. They told me they really love Governor Shapiro as their governor. They want him to stay, but if he could help Harris win, then they would want him to do whatever it takes. Basically, they're looking for a running mate that can help put her over the edge. Governor Shapiro, being from Pennsylvania, could potentially be that, Alex.
So what do you think it is, Dasha, that we're getting from the Harris campaign? Are they looking for the Electoral College vote? Is that what they're really looking for? Or is it all about, as it should be, perhaps, someone who might be able to step right into the Oval Office should something happen to the president?
Well, they put an emphasis on that latter part, someone who's ready for the job. But in terms of the strategy, look, it's also important to have somewhat of a complement and a contrast as well, right? And someone like Shapiro, who is seen as more of a moderate, or potentially somebody like Senator Mark Kelly from Arizona, who's also rumored to be on the list, who's from a border state, who could potentially help on the issue of immigration. So essentially someone that brings something to the ticket that bolsters either on the issue front, on the geography front, or on the demographic front, Alex.
Okay, let's talk to Peter now. No doubt Harris is galvanizing voters. I mean, we've seen evidence of that, and you and I spoke over the weekend as well. How does she plan to turn all that momentum into turnout, Peter?
Well, I mean, look, first of all, obviously the volunteers, the donors, the money, all of that's very helpful. She's got a couple weeks till the convention. She can kind of, still have that fresh sense, and the convention gives them 4 nights of prime time opportunities to introduce herself to a lot of Americans who might not really know that much about her. But you're right, she has to, it's 100 days, basically 99 days or so to the election. It's hard to keep up this kind of energy that she has had over that first week. They're very aware of that. They know that she won't be a fresh face forever, especially after Republicans start defining her on their terms. But she has the advantage of not having to go through the long slog of primary season and an extended general election season. In that sense, it's possible that this situation with President Biden, which no Democrat thought was ideal, may still work out actually kind of well for her in that sense.
Yeah, absolutely. She's got to keep the momentum for 3 months instead of like 3 years. I mean, that wouldn't be an official campaign, but they do start raising money at least that much in advance. What about this? Is this advantageous, Peter? Because Trump, he's being drowned out by this news cycle. First, by all this Democratic enthusiasm for Harris. Secondly, you have the flubs of his running mate, J.D. Vance. So does that help sustain a campaign like that? That and the brevity will keep the momentum going?
Well, for one thing, it definitely extinguishes the momentum he had coming out of his convention, right? Normally, a candidate comes out of their nominating convention with a bit of a head of steam, a bump in the polls, a sense of excitement on the part of the base, at least. And he had that excitement at the time in the room. But as soon as it was over and President Biden decided to withdraw, and suddenly all the attention went to Kamala Harris, and as you say, to J.D. Vance's somewhat, unorthodox, let's say, comments that he's made, all of that momentum was gone. The entire post-convention bump seems to be out the window, and he's starting from scratch. And he doesn't like to be overshadowed. He didn't like to be overshadowed by Democrats. He didn't like to be overshadowed by his own running mate. So he's certainly not in a happy place right now. And he'll try to do what he can to get back on top. He is an expert and obsessed with getting attention. He'll figure out ways to do that. But for the moment, yeah, he's being overshadowed.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, and you can think about this and let me know another time if there's anyone that he would want to be overshadowed by, Peter. Anyway, thank you so much, both to you and Dasha. Joining us right now, we have Democratic strategist, pollster, and MSNBC political analyst Cornell Belcher. Good to see you, Cornell. Let's talk about some good stuff in terms of the favorability rating for Harris among adults. It now stands at 43%. That's according to an ABC News Ipsos poll released yesterday. That same group found that Harris's favorability rating was at 35% a week earlier. So the change in her favorability, first of all, it's outside of the poll's margin of error, but it is an 8-point jump in 1 week. Then you have battleground polling. Harris is statistically tied with Trump. What do you make of all this? Is this the honeymoon phase, or is there enough momentum to carry Harris for the next 99 days?
Well, look, the change in favorables is pretty remarkable, but it's also, I think, based a lot on, and I saw this line from NBC's Chuck Todd, is that the vice president's the most famous unknown person in the country. And voters know the vice president, but they didn't really know her story and she would never been front and center because, of course, she's the vice president and it's not her job to be front and center. But now that she's front and center and voters are taking a look at her, it's like that new car. You go around it, you take a look at it, you listen to it. And apparently they're liking what they see because, again, I'm not being partisan here. The numbers are the numbers, and clearly the more they see of the vice president, the more they like her, and that's a really good thing, right? Can momentum be carried over? Well, then that's the job of campaigns, right? And the job of your campaign is to use that momentum and use that volunteer base and use all that incredible money that they've been raking in. And I will got to tell you, when you look at the money they've raked in a short period of time, and I worked for Obama in 08 and 12, it feels like that same kind of energy on the cusp of that same sort of energy and vibrance, particularly when you look at the young people and how much of that money is new grassroots money from people who hadn't given before. There's something different happening right now, and I think it's easier to carry that on if it's not central and centralized. And if you let the grassroots continue to sort of do it and the volunteers out there work and the campaign sort of get out of the way of what the people want to do, and particularly when you look online, I know you've seen the social media stuff. It is just phenomenal.
Yeah, it's exploded.
Memes and the stuff that's out there around her right now. And that's not generated by the campaign. And I still don't know what brat means.
Yeah. But
that's not from the campaign.
Yeah. Let me ask you about the hundreds of thousands of new voters that have registered since she announced her intentions. Are they guaranteed to translate to actual votes? What's the strategy to make sure they do?
No, that's a really good question. No, there's no guarantee in politics. But what I would tell you again is, I'm always careful about making comparisons to 08 because I don't think we'll ever see the energy and mobilization that we saw in 08. But I think this is about as best as we've seen. And I think the new people registering to participate, I think that's a really key indicator, right, of enthusiasm, a change in enthusiasm where you have hundreds of thousands of people now wanting to register and engage. That's a good sign. But now you got to do the work of campaigns. And the work of campaigns is in each of these states, there's a person in charge of this who's going to be looking at those new registrants and building an entire campaign, sort of reach out, communicate with them, touch them on the doors, reach them over social media, over radio ads, et cetera, to take advantage of that and show them the process of how to sort of vote. So the potential is there, but the campaign has to do the work of cultivating it and bringing it home.
Yep. As you said, no guarantees in politics ever. Cornell Belcher, thank you. Still ahead, a Supreme Court overhaul. How much of a long shot are President Biden's new proposals in a divided Congress? I'll ask someone in the Senate. The Judiciary Committee's Sheldon Whitehouse joins me after the break. Plus, what will Donald Trump tell federal agents about his assassination attempt when he sits down for a victim interview with the FBI? And it has been a week since Kamala Harris launched her presidential campaign, and the former president is still struggling to find an attack line that sticks. What sort of counteroffensive he's weighing now? We're back in 90 seconds.
One way to avoid expensive car repair bills is to be a race car driver. The other is Endurance.
Endurance saved me more than $7,000.
Without Endurance, breakdowns can cost thousands. With Endurance, you're covered.
Endurance covers nearly every car on the road. Plus,
you pick the mechanic you trust.
Act now for $300 off any plan, plus a year of elite benefits and a 30-day money-back guarantee.
Call 1-877-204-1084.
Now.
I think the issue that will determine who wins this election is the question of freedom. Freedom over your own body for women, freedom to read, freedom for parents of LGBTQ kids to parent them, whether you're talking about state races, local races, congressional races, or the race for president. The freedom question is actually the most important question on the ballot, really.
Next hour, President Biden is set to announce proposals for major reforms to the Supreme Court, an announcement that follows an op-ed this morning in which he noted the growing public distrust in the court, writing, "What is happening now is not normal, and it undermines the public's confidence in the court's decisions, including those impacting personal freedoms. We now stand in a breach." The president's reforms address the Supreme Court's recent immunity decision, calling for a constitutional amendment that limits the decision power. He is also calling for 18-year term limits for justices, as well as a code of conduct for the court. Joining us now, Democratic Senator from Rhode Island, Sheldon Whitehouse. Senator Whitehouse sits on the Senate Judiciary Committee and also chairs the subcommittee on federal courts, which makes you the perfect person to speak to about this. In part also, sir, because you've been calling for these reforms by personally sponsoring 2 acts addressing both ethics and term limits. Does President Biden's proposal mirror your efforts?
Yeah, his proposal is perfectly aligned with my ethics bill and also perfectly aligned with my term limits bill. So I think it's going to give a boost of positivity to both of them, and I appreciate the president stepping up this way.
Okay, you're smiling saying this, but Axios, sir, is reporting that President Biden did not consult with lawmakers on these reforms. Did you hear anything from the president before his announcement today?
We have been in regular touch with the White House about these bills and about these reforms for a long period of time. Ed Siskel, I've spoken to about them. I have 0 complaints about the White House outreach. And I'm very glad that they made the decision to have the president support fixing the immunity decision, putting term limits on these rogue justices, and having a real ethics program for the court like every other judge and pretty much every other federal official.
Tough question here. What is the actual impact if it is not likely reforms like these are going to get a lot of